radio station for progressive, open-minded people like you and me.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Welcome home, LA. We're all in this together.
Let's get it on.
It's KBLA Talk 1580, broadcasting from the heart of LA's Leimert Park. We've got a lot to talk about.
We are going to have to fight. We're going to have to struggle. We're going to have to struggle relentlessly to bring about some peace.
I'd rather be than with you. Yeah, loving you. Well. Day will make a way for night. All we'll need is candlelight and a song.
I'm Tavis Smiley. That's Ron Isley. He'll join us in our third hour today, the Isley Brothers, on KBLA Talk 1580 in our 11 o'clock hour, about 55 minutes from now. But I am pleased to commence this hour with our very own Reva Martin. On the backside of this hour, I should say very quickly, we'll check in with Phyllis Bennis on the latest regarding the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that missile that killed some citizens in Poland, and what NATO intends to do about it before this situation goes from bad to worse. But Reva Martin is the host of Reva Martin Out Loud, heard exclusively on KBLA Talk 1580, Saturdays and Sundays. And beyond the walls of this studio, and prior to joining this station, she has been for quite some time a brilliant attorney, trained at Harvard. And we're honored to have her as a colleague, but honored to have her in conversation for the next half hour about a major case that she has taken on. You've all heard about Bruce's Beach. This case, though, is unnerving. It's the story of Areva demanding reparations for a city-engineered Holocaust in Palm Springs back in the 60s that bulldozed and burned a black and brown community. You'll be hearing a lot more about this in the coming days. There's a wonderful piece, a powerful editorial in the LA Times today, which cites Areva. A big piece in today's LA Times you'll want to read about this. So again, if you heard about Bruce's Beach and the ways in which they put upon black people back in the day, you'll want to follow this particular story that Areva will unpack for us in just a moment. A couple other things I want to get her take on first, though. Areva, how are you today?
I'm fantastic. This is an amazing historical day, one that we've all been waiting for. Didn't know when it would happen, but yesterday, as you know, and you've been in conversations with our mayor-elect, we got the news that what we had hoped for and what the numbers seemed to suggest was happening did in fact happen. Karen Bass became the first woman and the second African-American in the history of Los Angeles to be the mayor. So I'm just ecstatic. It's a good day. Yeah,
it's a great day. You were heavily involved in the campaign, and for those of us around here who know you and know your work, we saw you really pushing for Karen Bass. So congratulations to you and all those persons who were involved in doing the work. I talked to my friend Kerman Maddox this morning. So many people who I've known for years. Kerman and I worked in the mayor's office, Tom Bradley, and here he is now helping get Karen elected. So I'm just proud for a lot of my friends, happy for a lot of my friends, and just delighted to see this great day. Let me ask you a quick question about Karen Bass. She didn't want to go there, and I suspect she's trying to process it, and she was very, very humble about it, which again is her way. But she didn't really want to talk so much about the historic election that she has just won, specifically being the first woman, being the second African American. She didn't want to talk about it, but we can talk about it. So what does that really mean for you and for me and for this city, Areva?
I think it means a tremendous amount, because when you look at the shrinking numbers of African Americans in the city of Los Angeles, you wonder what political power we will have, not just this year, but the years to come. And there's a great piece out in the LA Times about black political power, and an article that came out before Karen won questioned what would happen to that political power if she did not win. But the article yesterday talks about the number of African Americans in elected office in California. Secretary of State Shirley Weber, State Controller Malia Cohen, first black woman ever to be the controller of the third largest economy in the world. chair of the Board of Supervisors, Holly Mitchell. We have 3 black congresswomen because a black woman, Sidney Kamlocker, replaces Karen Bass in the U.S. Congress. And when you just look around Los Angeles, we got a black mayor in Long Beach. First time a black mayor in the city of Long Beach. We have London Breed in San Francisco. We have a black woman who is now the district attorney in San Francisco. So I think what it means is black folks are still in the game. We are still in the game. Even though our numbers are shrinking, we are punching above our weight.
Yep.
And I think that's a good thing.
And what do you make of the fact, I said to her in that conversation, as you probably heard, that the woman thing is a big deal, the black thing is a big deal, but the $100 million plus thing is a bigger deal to my mind. There is no precedent for this in the country where someone has raised $9 million and had some debt, but raised $9 million, but withstood a $100 million plus frontal assault. She pulled it off.
It is so unprecedented, Tavis, and you said in your intro that I was involved in the campaign, and I was boots on the ground, traveling with Karen Bass, doing fundraising events, talking to people, and I can tell you the money, we could see that money. You could see it in lawn signs. You saw it in those commercials. You couldn't turn on your television. You couldn't turn on your computer. It was digital ads. It was, television ads. It was literature. It was people on the streets, people literally getting paid $40 an hour to do a job that typically you get paid $15 to do. So we saw that money at work. And it was sometimes intimidating. It was daunting. But we never doubted for one moment that Karen would lose. She was never down. I mean, she was tight. The polls tightened. But she was never behind him. And I always believed that this Democratic city would not send someone like Rick Caruso, who checked the box to be a Democrat 18 days before he announced his run for mayor, that they wouldn't put him in the mayor's office because they would understand that that's so much bigger than just being in the mayor's office in Los Angeles. If you are the mayor of Los Angeles, you have instant, stature in the National Democratic Party. You're going to be on the stage. You're going to give a speech at the 2024 convention. And it's not going to be a speech at 10 o'clock at night. You're going to give a prime time speech at the convention. You're going to be standing next to the president, the vice president. I mean, you play a major part in our entire party. And I just could not imagine how that would have worked had that been Rick Caruso. And I think people understood that. People saw through those the ads. They saw that they were glossy and they were slick, but they were not authentically who Rick Caruso has been and who he's shown up as throughout his time in Los Angeles as a real estate developer.
Let me cover one more issue, and then we'll move to this case that you are now in front of, on top of, vis-a-vis this community being burned out and bulldozed in Palm Springs back in the 60s. So we move from one woman making history in L.A. today, Karen Bass, as the first woman to be elected mayor of the City of Angels, to Nancy Pelosi, the first woman to become Speaker of the House. Just announced in the last hour that she will step down, of course, as House Speaker because Republicans have now crossed the threshold by some number of votes, still figuring that out. But Republicans will now control the House. We will see if Kevin McCarthy, speaking of people from California, Karen Bass from California, Kevin McCarthy from California, now the minority leader, will see if he ends up becoming the Speaker. So it's fascinating. The speakership could go from one Californian named Nancy Pelosi to another Californian named Kevin McCarthy, two different parties, obviously. But Nancy Pelosi, the era of her leadership as Speaker or minority leader has come to an end. She said last hour that she will not seek an election, a leadership position. So can you sort of encapsulate the era of Nancy Pelosi and her historic role as a leader in the House of Representatives?
Trailblazer. I mean, that's the word that comes to mind for me. I mean, she broke the glass ceiling in so many ways. And what I love about Nancy Pelosi was she was unapologetic. She was bold. She was courageous. She was a mother. Nancy Pelosi has children. She has grandchildren. So she's doing, saving the democracy in some ways. She got the Obamacare, the health care bill. She's credited with getting that over the finish line. She's credited with being just a brilliant tactician, just brilliant in terms of counting votes and knowing how to get key pieces of legislation passed. And I don't know if people know this, she was a huge supporter of Karen Bass.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy Pelosi fundraised for Karen Bass. When Karen Bass became the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, she worked very closely with, Nancy and Karen worked very closely together. And so I'm so proud of what she's done. I'm also glad, Tavis, that she's stepping aside, because sometimes you can stay too long.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we needed her in this era when Biden came into office, and she was there to help him get infrastructure and some of the other pieces of key legislation that was passed in the last 2 years. But I'm glad she's going to pass the torch now. It's time for her to get her flowers while she's still alive, for us to celebrate her, to acknowledge and recognize her. But I'm excited about this new era. There's so many people that she has mentored, that she's poured into, that I think are ready to step up and, carry the torch.
Yeah.
And so I think we should celebrate her, but we should also give her credit for not staying too long, because we know too often in lots of jobs, lots of positions, people don't know when it's time to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And I think this is the perfect time for her to move on.
Nope, that old adage comes to mind. Much better for them to say gone so soon rather than you stayed too long.
Too long.
Reba Martin is our guest. When we come forward, we'll jump straight into this conversation about reparations for this city-engineered Holocaust in Palm Springs that bulldozed and burned a black and brown community back in the 60s, and what Reba Martin and her firm intend to do about it. You're listening to Reba Martin on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
This Black Friday, we're checking everyone off your list with unbeatable deals at Ulta Beauty all week long. Starting November 20th, shop hundreds of exciting deals in store and online. And beginning Tuesday, get $12 mascaras from brands like Benefit and $10 lippies from brands like Fenty, and so much more. Because our kind of holiday is you having your kind of holiday. So what are you waiting for? Hurry to an Ulta Beauty near you, or buy online and pick up in store. Ulta Beauty, the possibilities are beautiful.
Every day, I bet your floors have shoe grime and pet grime and invisible grime.
Invisible grime?
Yep, the kind of grime that you only notice when you look at your socks.
Ew.
So get Swiffer Sweeper Wet, the cleaning power of a mop with the convenience of a wipe. Sweeper heavy-duty wet pads come prepped with a cleaning solution that traps and locks dirt and grime deep inside the pad, even dirt and grime you can't see, for the clean floors you want, anytime you want it. Swiffer Sweeper Heavy-Duty Wet Pad.
This Sunday and every Sunday is the African Marketplace and Drum Circle Community Market. Get free groceries, essential resources, and buy black from local merchants of arts, beauty, custom black merchandise, and more. Choose from a wide variety of cuisines, custom-made clothing, jewelry, and a lot more. Experience the true essence of Africatown at Leimert Park every Sunday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Join the Drum Circle, dance, enjoy live performances, connect with other conscious black people. Experience black excellence every Sunday in Africatown at Leimert Park. You can find us on Degnan Boulevard near Vernon and Crenshaw in the heart of Africatown at Leimert Park. That's the African Marketplace and Drum Circle Community Market. Join us for music, shopping, food, and fun this and every Sunday. Support black businesses, recycle black dollars, and feed your soul. The African Marketplace and Drum Circle Community Market every Sunday in Africatown at Leimert Park. Brought to you by Africatown Enterprise and the African Village Vendors Association.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
So, Reva Martin, I'll tee this up and let you explain why you have taken on this case and what you expect to accomplish. So, due to racially restrictive covenants in the 1950s and 1960s, blacks and Mexicans in Palm Springs, California, could only live in a part of town called Section 14. And when the city wanted to develop this land for commercial purposes, it forcibly evicted these black and brown people, burned their homes and their belongings. Reva Martin, take it from there.
Yeah, one thing I want to set the record straight about, Tavis, is the word eviction. Mm-hmm. Because as a lawyer, when we think of an eviction, we think of a legal process where someone actually serves you with a legal document, a complaint. There's a court proceeding perhaps, and then there's an order that's issued by a court that's served on you by a sheriff. And if you don't follow that order, that sheriff can forcibly remove you from your home. Mm-hmm. So there's been this very, legal process that everybody gets to participate in. Due process rights are protected. That didn't happen in this situation. Mm. So when we say eviction, it is not the eviction that may come to mind for the average person that maybe have been through an eviction. There is no legal documentation that has been found that can substantiate that legal process whereby a complaint is filed, whereby you get a chance to come into court and give defenses as to why maybe you shouldn't have to leave a property, where an order is issued by a judge, where that order is served on you. So there's no evidence of any of that. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands we're not talking about that kind of eviction. We're talking about a city deciding that it needed prime real estate in its downtown, the glitzy, glamorous Palm Springs that was the playground to the rich and famous, Lucille Ball, Frank Sinatra, John Wayne, you name it. If you were a big star in the 50s or 60s and you lived in Los Angeles, Palm Springs probably became your exotic desert getaway. Mm-hmm. You could go there and get out of the glare of the studio executives. If you had a mistress, or if you had a drinking problem, or you just, had whatever you wanted to do that would not be front page news by the gossip columnists, that's where you went. You went to Palm Springs. It also became the home to the Chicago mob. Mm-hmm. So, it was this place where people went who had a lot of secrets. And to build that community, to support those wealthy people in the 50s, 40s, and 50s, black people from the South moved into Palm Springs. Mexican Americans moved to Palm Springs. And as you said in your opening, they weren't allowed to live in the communities where these white people were starting to buy their vacation homes and starting to live. They were relegated to this 1 square mile, which was property owned by indigenous people. But that was where, if you were black or brown in Palm Springs in the 50s and 60s, you had to live. And it became a thriving community. Black and brown people, we just make it work.
Oh, yeah.
And so people were building their own homes. And these people, these black and brown people, they became the backbone, the foundation of this city. They were chefs. They were carpenters. They were chauffeurs. They were nannies. They were the maids. They were the people building the hospitals, the golf clubs, the country clubs, the tennis clubs. They were building Palm Springs. But yet they lived in what some described as substandard conditions. But when I talk to the 500-plus plaintiffs, survivors and descendants, I'll call them, that I represent, they didn't see, poverty. They saw a working-class community where their mothers and fathers were going to work every day. I have a client who said her father took pride because he was a carpenter and he built their home from scratch. wood and materials to build their home. Now, because of the racist policies that existed in California during this time, he couldn't get a home loan. You couldn't go into a bank and get a mortgage if you were black or brown. So they couldn't buy the land that the homes were on, but they could build the homes. And their hopes were one day they could get a mortgage, and maybe they would move that house to another location where they could own that house and they could pass that house on to their children, to their grandchildren. They could build that kind of generational wealth that we know home ownership allows you to do. But the city had different plans. The city under a mayor, Frank Bogart, hatched a plan to remove these residents because they wanted this property. A federal law had been passed that changed the lease terms for this indigenous land. The leases were originally very short leases, 5 years, so it wasn't very attractive for commercial development. But there was some legislation that made those leases longer, and once those leases became longer, it was game on.
Yeah.
This land was now attractive to developers and to, hotel owners and restaurant owners. And so they needed to get these people out. So rather than go through the formal legal process, they decided that they would just use force and intimidation. And that force and intimidation became literal bulldozers driving up onto the property, bulldozing houses. And then they used the most horrific part of this, Tavis, is they used the city fire department to set the homes and the belongings inside, the personal belongings, on fire. So you come home, your house is on fire, your first instinct is to call the fire department. But in this case, there was no fire department to call because the fire department was setting the fires. So not only were they forcibly removed, they were left without recourse. There was no one to report the atrocities to because the people you would normally go to for help and protection were the perpetrators of the atrocity. And eventually, a complaint was filed with the California State Attorney General. The Attorney General came into Palm Springs, did an investigation, wrote a scathing report outlining the racial motivations, the intentional actions on the part of the city, used the phrase, called it a city-engineered Holocaust, made the comparison to Bel Air, said if this had happened to the wealthy community of Bel Air in Los Angeles, there would have been aid provided. There would have been a plan to relocate these families. These families would not have had to scatter. These families wouldn't have ended up in dilapidated, unincorporated parts of Palm Springs, that there would have been support. But none of that happened with these families. And so this whole community upended. Churches, businesses, boarding houses, gone. Some families moved to Banning, some moved to Ontario, many left the state. And as we know black folks do, they buried it deep inside, the scars, the trauma, the emotional hurt. And it wasn't until very recently that some of these families even started talking about this. But many of them have stories now where they can say they came home from school and saw their house on fire. That's how horrible this was. And I got involved. I got introduced to these families, Tavis, and they were represented by a couple of lawyers. And they were really, they're kind of over their heads in terms of what they were doing. But I've been doing a lot of work around reparations in some of the media stuff that I do. I've been working with Dr. Julianne Malvo, who is deeply involved in this movement. And I've interviewed a lot of folks and just had a natural interest in it, obviously, as a civil rights lawyer. And the families, told me, look, we need help.
Yeah.
The city has apologized, but nothing has happened since then. And we need a way to move this forward. And we would just love it if you would come on board. And I just instantly, I was drawn to the families. Their story was so compelling to me. It was so powerful. As a black woman, as a civil rights lawyer, as someone who admired Palm Springs myself, who was vacationed there, I didn't know this story. I'd never heard about Section 14. We've heard of Tulsa, Oklahoma. We've heard of Rosewood, Florida. So many of these atrocities, have come to a national attention. But this has been a dark and very, very well kept secret in Palm Springs.
Got about 2 minutes left here. I didn't want to interrupt because you were sharing that story so beautifully, although tragically, but beautifully. Let me ask you one quick question in the minute and a half I have here. Why not just use eminent domain? I'm not a Harvard trained lawyer like you are, but why burn them down? Why set their houses on fire? Why bulldoze? Why not just use the government mandate of eminent domain?
Power and lack thereof. Why? Why do I have to go to court to get you out when I can come and argue with you and tell you to move? And if you don't do it the way I want you to do it, when I want you to do it, I can send the city fire department to burn your house down.
Here's my exit question. I hear you. It's Jesus. My exit question is
pretty answer.
Yeah, I know.
Answer, but
no,
I mean, you know the history of how we've been treated in this country.
No, I get it.
I
get it.
It's a very good question, though.
Yeah, no, I get it. 45 seconds left here. So, what happens next? What do you hope to accomplish?
Re-engage the city in the process to start creating a legal framework to restore these families, create a funding mechanism, a funding framework, use some of the models that are out there that other cities and municipalities have used to, engage in restorative justice. These families deserve to be compensated. These families deserve to be made whole, and that's what I'm on a mission to do.
You'll be hearing a lot more about this. Again, beautiful piece in the LA Times today. You'll want to read the story. Reva's cited in the LA Times op-ed today about this case, and just honored that she gave us the exclusive, as did Karen Bass. Got all kind of exclusives around here today, thanks to Karen Bass and Reva Martin.
I think that means.
No. It's KBLA is just the place everybody wants to hang out, and I love that. So you hear more about this on Reva Martin Out Loud, of course, on Saturdays and Sundays here, and of course I'll be following as well since Reva is a colleague here, and hopefully the outcome here will be similar to what we saw at Bruce's Beach. And I can tell you this: as long as Reva Martin is on the case, you can expect that something is going to happen here. Reva, thanks for sharing it first with us. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Tavis.
Good to have you on. More of our program. We'll check in with Ukraine and what happens now that this missile was dropped in Poland with Phyllis Bennis after News, Traffic, and Sports on KBLA Talk 1580.
Courage is contagious. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Mike Moore, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The nonprofit Jubalong is putting up billboards in Metro Detroit to fight against anti-Semitism. Co-founder Archie Gottesman says the area is one of 6 cities across the country where they have rented the billboards.
Instead of just saying stop anti-Semitism, that's not catching. We live in a world where message matters.
The Anti-Defamation League says there were 112 anti-Semitic incidents in Michigan last year. The billboards will be up in Macomb County for the next month. African-American Kyrie Irving is nearing completion on the process needed for a return to play and could rejoin the Brooklyn Nets soon. He was suspended for his failure to initially apologize for and condemn his social media link to a film riddled with anti-Semitic material. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Taking the drive through Pasadena, troubles on that 210 west at Sierra Madre, Altadena. Crash onto the right shoulder here, and we're seeing a busy drive from Mountain. Commerce, a collision from earlier clearing, but a busy commute for the 710 north approaching that 5. That wreck is cleared right around the 105. You're busy. Monterey Park, the 710 south at Valley Boulevard. 2 right lanes blocked with an injury crash. Stalled vehicle in downtown on the 110 north at the 101. That is stuck at a center lane.
Is this the tackle? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Rams got some much-needed good news. Quarterback Matthew Stafford has cleared the NFL's concussion protocol and will play in Sunday's game in New Orleans. LeBron James has agreed to co-produce a docuseries on the life of Nipsey Hussle. The docuseries will include interviews with several major players in the music business, including Snoop Dogg, Kendrick Lamar, and Diddy. Nipsey was 33 when he was fatally shot in 2019 outside one of his stores in South LA. Today could be a game-changing moment for UCLA athletics. The UC Board of Regents are meeting today to vote on whether or not they should block UCLA's move to the Big Ten Conference. UCLA is joining USC to move to the Big Ten in 2024. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. This sports report was brought to you by MVP Accident Attorneys. When it comes to your settlement, we're a slam dunk. Call 833-MVP-WINS or check their website at themvp.com KBLA.com for a free case review.
When you're the victim of a car accident, hiring the right law firm can be the difference between a rewarding settlement and striking out. Call the pros at MVP Accident Attorneys at 833-MVP-WINS for your free consultation.
Call me your MVP.
Health is Wealth and Medicare and Covered California's open enrollment for medical insurance is here. RHJ Insurance Agency can help you find affordable rates and the plan that's just right for you and your family. Call 562-204-6120 for your free quote. Don't leave your health to chance. Open enrollment is here and affordable coverage is just a phone call away. Call 562-204-6120 for your free quote and get the coverage you need. Go to www.rhjins.com. East West Players brings you the stage play Brothers Paranormal by Prince Gomovilas, directed by Jeff Liu, November 17th through December 11th. After a nationwide increase in sightings of Asian-looking ghosts, two Thai brothers, one from Thailand and one from the American Midwest, struggle to launch a ghost hunting business and are called to the home of an African-American couple displaced from Hurricane Katrina. This suspenseful, humorous, compassionate exploration of the trauma of leaving home, whether crossing the country, the globe, or the other side, is a play for everyone. Get tickets now through December 11th at eastwestplayers.org. eastwestplayers.org.
Extra, extra, read all about it, read all about it, read all about it.
In recent editions of the Los Angeles Standard newspaper, read about HBCU's impact in Los Angeles, the Screening Room LA meeting at the Gathering Spot in West Adams, giving black filmmakers a place to showcase their work, to codename Crenshaw Boulevard Malcolm X Boulevard. Hotville Chicken brings Nashville hot chicken to the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza. The Engineer Factory, preparing black children for STEM majors and professions. Jan Perry addressing the homelessness and housing crisis as she runs for Congress. Shauna Charles' career in public relations. Local black hiking groups. And Los Angeles Philharmonic Inglewood headquarters hosting free music classes for local children. Read about these stories at lastandardnewspaper.com. And follow this black-owned publication on Facebook and Instagram.
Headlines. Headlines. Have you heard it? Have you heard it? Have you heard it? Have you heard it? Have you heard it?
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where everybody is somebody and nobody is a stranger. You belong here.
I'm taking care of business, woman, can't you see? I gotta make it for you, and I gotta make it for me. Oh, sometimes it seems, girl, I'm neglecting you. Well, I love to spend more time. I got so many things to do. Oh, I got work to do.
I got work to do. We've been doing it for hour and a half so far, another hour and a half to go. I told you we were going to squeeze an 80-pound show into a 30-pound bag. It's been a great hour and a half so far, a lot of great conversations, and still more to go. In our third and final hour today, we'll be joined by the Isley brothers for a great conversation, a career conversation. Their legacy is unmatched in many ways. I look forward to a conversation with the Isley brothers when we get to the final hour of this program. We check in now with our friend Phyllis Bennis, author, activist, and director of the New Internationalism Project at the Institute, that is, for Policy Studies, about the latest in this Russian invasion of Ukraine, that missile that killed citizens in Poland, and what NATO intends to do about it before this situation goes from bad to worse. I am pleased to welcome Phyllis Bennis back to this program. Phyllis, how are you today?
Very well. Great to be with you, Tavis.
It's good to have you back on. I always appreciate your insights. Let me say that up front, and let me just jump right in at the time that we have in this half hour. We've been discussing this, here and there over the course of the last few days. Before I get a little more deeply into the conversation, how did you read this missile that somehow landed in Poland? 2 citizens were killed. How did you read that, and how have you read our president's response to that up until this present moment?
Well, it's interesting, Tavis. When I first heard about it, I thought, okay, let's everybody slow down here. Let's find out what is going on here. It did not seem to make any sense that Russia would have deliberately targeted a NATO country at this point.
Mm-hmm.
The Russian military is showing its inability to carry out the kind of escalation that some in Moscow, maybe including Putin, it's kind of unclear who's calling the shots there, that they're not in a position to be able to escalate. So the idea that this was a clear violation of NATO's rules and we should be talking about Article 5 of the NATO treaty that says an attack on one means everybody mobilizes for war, that seemed way off to me. And then when I started hearing, it was really just a few hours later, we started hearing from the White House, from the Pentagon, from the NATO leadership, everybody slow down. We need to do some investigation. I thought, wow, they're doing the right thing for a change, which is not escalating the situation, not using a lot of bellicose rhetoric to say, okay, this proves that it's a question of a new war between Russia and NATO, and we're mobilizing for war. And as it turns out, all the indications seem to be it was not a Russian missile at all. It may have been an old Soviet-era missile that was part of the Ukrainian anti-missile defense system, which, of course, uses missiles itself. I don't think they know that for sure, but what they do seem very convinced of is that this was not a deliberate attack by Russia. And the important thing here, I think, is less whether that's actually accurate or not.
Mm-hmm.
Was it really, and they're not telling us? The important thing is that leading voices in the White House, in the Pentagon, at the NATO headquarters in Brussels, are all saying, we do not believe this was a Russian attempt to escalate to a direct attack on NATO. That's the important thing, because the message that they're sending specifically to Russia, but to all of us as well, is this is not a moment when we are looking to escalate the war even further. Now, it needs to go much further than that. We need a ceasefire. We have needed a ceasefire since day one of this horrible war. And I don't see that call coming yet, at least not sufficiently, from the White House and the Pentagon and the NATO leadership. But there do seem to be indications that there is less hostility to that idea. And that's really important, because that's the direction we need to be going in, is away from the question of more military aid, more weapons, more weapons, more weapons, escalate, 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 and instead say, okay, we need an end game here.
Yeah.
And end games require an immediate ceasefire and serious longer-term negotiations for what a peace agreement's going to look like. That's where we need to go.
To your mind, Phyllis, who has been most hostile to the ceasefire?
You know, I think everybody has been hostile to the ceasefire. This war was certainly not unprovoked. The U.S. and NATO had been provoking Russia for years, but it was illegal. Russia had a choice. It didn't have to respond to the provocations with military force. It chose to do so in an illegal and aggressive war. So the war on the ground started with Russian aggression. Russia has not been eager to move towards a ceasefire. On the other hand, the Ukrainians have not been eager for a ceasefire either. Early in the conflict, in the first couple of weeks, both sides seemed to be open to the idea of negotiations. There were talks orchestrated by Turkey and the United Nations that led to a couple of proposals, but they quickly collapsed. There are reports, none of them have been fully vindicated, but there are reports that various U.S. and other Western officials urged the Ukrainians not to engage in a ceasefire yet, because they were, it was in the early stages. The reason was it will help Russia. Russia's on the offensive. Later, some of the same forces were saying we shouldn't have a ceasefire now because Ukraine is on the offensive. They're retaking some of the territory that Russia had taken.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that both sides, and particularly not only the Ukrainian side, but the supporters of Ukraine, the U.S., other NATO countries in Europe, the U.K., have not been pushing for a ceasefire. The answer has been, well, we can't tell the Ukrainians what to do. It's like, well, that's true. Nobody is saying that the U.S. should be telling the Ukrainians what they should concede or not concede in any negotiations. But we have been sending tens of billions of dollars and thousands, hundreds of thousands of weapons to Ukraine. This is very much our war. We are not an outsider cheerleading from the sides here. Mm-hmm. We have already spent $65 billion provided to Ukraine. That's more than the entire military budget of Russia for this year. Mm-hmm. So we are clearly involved. Yeah. And it means that we do need to be urging a ceasefire. We could start by saying we need negotiations right now between the U.S. and Russia, separate from what are the negotiations going to be between Russia and Ukraine. The U.S. and Russia have a number of issues that demand attention and that need diplomacy, including the nuclear weapons agreements that have collapsed. There needs to be a clarity from the U.S. that the sanctions imposed on Russia will in fact be lifted when a ceasefire is in effect, so that there's clear incentive for Russia to change its behavior. Mm-hmm. The U.S. is building a new military base in Poland less than 100 miles from the Russian border, incredibly provocative. Maybe there could be some kind of negotiations over stopping or at least pausing the construction of that provocative new base. All of these are bilateral issues between the U.S. and Russia that don't put us in the position of telling Ukraine what to do, but would go pretty far in encouraging some level of negotiations to go forward.
Speaking of going forward, when we come forward, I want to come back to this issue of U.S.-Russia relations or the lack thereof. Number one, I want to give Phyllis Bennett an opportunity to just offer her critique of NATO. It seems to me that whatever happens out of this crisis, this missile and wherever it came from that killed citizens in Poland now is as propitious a time as ever to reassess what we think of NATO at this particular moment and our role in it, our being the U.S.'s role in it. And I think the president should get high marks for sort of tamping down, pumping the brakes once this missile landed in Poland and everybody got up in arms and thought it was fired by Russia. He sort of stepped in, I think rightly so, and tried to lower the temperature in the room. I'll get her take of how she thinks President Biden is navigating this particular crisis. A great deal more to talk to Phyllis Bennett about in this hour. And then in our final hour today, the Isley Brothers. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
Tweets with racial slurs have soared since Elon Musk took over Twitter. Maisha Cairo here with your K-Black Minute News. Only a week after the Tesla CEO bought Twitter, reports of the racial epithet used to attack black people was reportedly used 26,000 times, tripling its average this year. And a slur used to target trans people increased by 53%. Instances of offensive terms for homosexual men soared 39% over the yearly average. Examples of offensive terms used to target both Jews and Hispanic people also increase. This all according to research done by the Center for Countering Digital Hate. KBLA listeners, what do you think about Elon Musk, the man who describes himself as a free speech absolutist, taking over Twitter? Let us know by tweeting us at KBLA 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Did you know fixing outdoor leaks can save 27 to 90 gallons of water per day? Even tiny leaks can be huge water wasters. Conserving water starts with a few simple water-saving actions at home and in your yard, like adjusting your sprinklers and adding drip irrigation so you water only where it's needed. We can all do our part to conserve water. Visit SaveOurWater.com for more water-saving tips. Save water, save California.
When you're the victim of a car accident, hiring the right law firm can be the difference between a rewarding settlement and striking out. Call the pros at MVP Accident Attorneys at 833-MVP-WINS for your free consultation.
Call me your MVP.
Sanctuary of Hope invites you to come out, support Homeless Youth Awareness Month at a candlelight, interfaith prayer, and youth voice reflections, Tuesday, November 29th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. For more info, visit thesoh.org. Did you know a housing crisis puts young people at huge risk of more violence and trauma? And right now, young people and their children need support more than ever. Prevention services such as financial assistance, education, employment support, and mental health well-being are main drivers of impact. Contact thesoh.org for more information. Did you know an estimated 4.2 million youth and young adults experience homelessness, of which 700,000 are unaccompanied minors? The pathway to functional zero is prevention. More info at thesoh.org. Again, thesoh.org.
Broadcasting live from Leimert Park, USA. Welcome back to your home for unapologetically progressive radio. KBLA Talk 1580.
You telling me that you've been missing me.
You can't fade that Ron Isley. You just can't fade him. Ron Isley and Ernie join us in our third and final hour today. We continue now our conversation with Phyllis Bennis, author, activist, director of the New Internationalism Project at the Institute for Policy Studies, and all-around expert on these international issues. She's my go-to. I love talking to Phyllis Bennis in moments of consequence and crisis like this. And speaking of moments of consequence and crisis, give me your critique in this present moment, Phyllis Bennis, of NATO.
You know, Tavis, I think NATO is one of those instruments that should have been dismantled years ago. NATO is an instrument of the Cold War, the old Cold War, and now potentially dangerously a new Cold War. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 and the Warsaw Pact collapsed in 1991, NATO should have, if they had to, declare victory, fine, open the champagne and declare victory and get out and say, our job is done. Our job is done. I've been part of a global movement known as No to NATO that has organized protests at NATO summit meetings all around the world. Mm-hmm. In fact, the last time I got tear gassed was in Strasbourg in France at a No to NATO protest in 2010. It should have ended then. But instead, what did we get? We got the expansion of NATO. It was as if it was looking for a new justification, a new raison d'etre, if you will. Mm-hmm. And we got NATO leading wars way outside of its defense area, which is Europe, leading wars in Eastern Europe, in Kosovo, in Afghanistan, in Libya, notably in 2011, to disastrous results every time, leading to the killing of huge numbers of civilians every time. Always justified because, well, there was an issue of human rights violations, there was this, there was that. There's always a reason to go to war. And the result is that you escalate wars around the world, you kill more civilians, and NATO becomes the instrument of choice for Western governments, most notably the U.S. It gives the U.S. a kind of multilateral fig leaf to cover its unilateral decision-making. And what we're seeing now with the expansion of NATO, as a result, one of the terrible consequences of this war in Ukraine, with the expansion of NATO, we're now going to be seeing Finland and Sweden, two countries with a long, proud commitment to non-participation in military alliances, standing outside of these military alliances. Now they can't wait to join NATO. And unfortunately, public opinion in both of those countries has shifted dramatically so that people are supporting their governments moving to expand NATO. We're seeing countries across Europe, both the Eastern European countries that joined after the collapse of the Soviet Union, very much in violation of the agreement the U.S. had reached with the post-Soviet Russian leadership that said we will not expand NATO any further east, and they went ahead and did it anyway. Yeah. Those Eastern members, but also some of the Western European countries, are now talking about massive escalations in their military spending. Their military budgets are going up. They're going to be buying a lot more weapons from U.S. military producers, meaning that the big U.S. Military companies are going to be making an absolute killing on this war and its consequences, and on the expanded version of NATO that we're going to be seeing emerging in the next several years.
Our remaining moments with Phyllis Bennett when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminding you that when we fight, we win. Community Coalition trains activists and organizers in order to support power building with Black, Brown, Indigenous, and people of color. Community Coalition works to help transform the social and economic conditions in South LA that foster addiction, crime, violence, and poverty by building a community institution that involves thousands in creating, influencing, and changing public policy. Founded by Karen Bass in 1990, Community Coalition was born as an African American and Latino organization with the goal of turning hopelessness and despair into action. The activism of the Community Coalition's members and community residents has almost solely stimulated economic recovery in South LA for decades, generating billions of dollars by redirecting them to South LA schools and foster care. In addition, Community Coalition offers amazing mind, body, soul resources, advocacy, and policy work, and has a robust and active membership body. To become a member, get a referral, or get support for your nonprofit, visit cocosouthla.org. That's cocosouthla.org, or call 323-750-9087. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Maisha Cairo here with Dom Kennedy at JP Morgan Chase's Advancing Black Wealth Tour. They're here to promote generational wealth building in Black communities. He's an independent rapper and the owner of OPM record label. Dom Kennedy, why do you find it important to be here today at this event with Chase?
For me, we've been having a lot of conversations with them, and been giving me a lot of good facts and a lot of good feedback that I felt like needed to be shared. And if people heard it, they would take to the information, and it would help them on their quest to be homeowners and just better off financially across the board. They like my perspective, and being an artist and somebody that people knew that was born and raised in LA, people older and like bank managers could kind of be a little intimidating, I guess, to everyday people, especially that has never purchased a home. So just the angle of me being able to communicate it and make the story real, I guess for the younger people was a great opportunity, and I didn't want to pass on.
That's awesome. So answer me this. Why is it important for companies like Chase to promote generational wealth in Black and Brown communities?
Keep it real, they make a lot of money off the Black and Brown communities. I look at it like it's a great responsibility for them to take on, to want to share some knowledge and some facts and try to put more people in homes, and give them a shot at and a chance at generational wealth. I think it's beneficial to both parties,
I'm Maisha Cairo, and that was Dom Kennedy. Stay tuned for more tips from Chase's Advancing Black Wealth Tour.
Interrogating your assumptions and expanding your inventory of ideas. Let's get back to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Got about 3 minutes left, Phyllis Bennett. Just 3 minutes here. How do you think President Biden has done stewarding this this military drama?
Just before I say that, Tavis, let me just say I want to join with all of you in LA in congratulating you on electing my old friend Karen Bass as your new mayor. I just heard the announcement about Coco, and it's a wonderful thing. I think that President Biden has done the right thing in tamping down the escalatory rhetoric that was on the rise so quickly with the explosion that happened in Poland. Mm-hmm. But it's not enough. He has got to move towards direct support for a ceasefire and for diplomacy. It can start, as I mentioned earlier, with direct diplomacy between the U.S. and Russia right now. But beyond that, I think that we have an absolute obligation to be pushing for there to be a diplomatic solution. Wars end with diplomacy. Mm-hmm. Almost no war ends the way World War II ended. People think it's going to be like on a ship somewhere with some flag going up and some commander kneeling in front of the other saying, I surrender, I surrender. It doesn't work like that anymore. There's going to be negotiations. The question is, how many more people have to die? How many more cities have to be destroyed before those negotiations go forward?
But how do you do diplomacy with Russia while they're invading another sovereign nation?
Wars often are about invasions of sovereign nations. This is the one we're paying a lot of attention to, but they have been going on in other places as well that we don't pay so much attention to around the world. What Russia did was illegal. It has to stop. There's going to have to be negotiations demanding that they pull back. But first you need a ceasefire with both sides stopping their fighting so that there can be those negotiations. You know, the U.S. for 5 years negotiated with Vietnam while the war was waged. That's a much harder way to do it. Millions, several million Vietnamese died. We don't have to wait for that. We don't have to wait for more Ukrainian civilians to be killed in this horrific war. We need negotiations. We need a ceasefire now.
And right quick here, Katrina Vanden Heuvel was on this program a day or so ago, and I asked her about this. Let me ask your take on it. That progressive Democratic letter being retracted, which was urging diplomacy to end the Ukraine war. What did you make of that retraction?
I think that it was inevitable it was going to be retracted given the vitriol and the level of attack that faced the leadership of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Mm-hmm. I think that what we're seeing now is that they were absolutely right in calling for a diplomatic track. What we're seeing is that now the call is coming from the top leadership of the Pentagon, from the White House, from the NATO leadership, and they are vindicating the position of Pramila Jayapal and Ro Khanna and Jamie Raskin and the others of the 30 members of the Progressive Caucus who signed that letter. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate they were attacked so brutally that they felt they had no choice but to withdraw their letter. The letter was right. It was a very soft letter. I would have written a much harder letter, demanding even more. Yeah. But this was an important beginning. And it's unfortunate that it had to be withdrawn, but now we're seeing that they were exactly on the right track.
Yeah. Well, you're always on the right track, and I'm always delighted to have you on this program to help us understand these issues of international crisis and consequence. Phyllis Bennis is the author. She's activist. She's director of the New Internationalism Project at the Institute for Policy Studies. And again, I'm delighted to have had her on this program today. Phyllis, we'll check in soon. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Tavis. It's always good to be with you.
Good to be with you. The final hour of Tavis Smiley. It went that fast. One more to go, though. The Isley Brothers are on tap on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Doug Davis, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Karen Bass is the first woman and second black person elected as mayor for the city of Los Angeles. The congresswoman defeated billionaire developer Rick